It's time, Cougar Nation. Cougar Tracks. The best season analysis with BYU insider Mitch Harper on KSL NewsRadio and on video every day on the YouTube page for KSL Sports.
Welcome into Cougar Tracks here on the KSL Sports YouTube and KSL NewsRadio. I am your BYU insider, Mitch Harper. It's a game day eve as BYU gets ready to take on the rival, the Utah Utes, on Saturday in Provo. And let's dive into the matchup in our top story of the day here on Cougar Tracks.
The top story of the day. The biggest story in the world of BYU sports right here on Cougar Tracks.
Number 15, BYU, undefeated, 6-0, 3-0 in Big 12 play, hosting number 23, Utah, 5-1, 2-1 in the Big 12. Fourth meeting all time between these historic rivals where both are in the top 25, 1994, 2008, 2009, and now 2025 as members of the Big 12 Conference. It was the WAC in 94, 08 and 09 was Mountain West. Now it's the Big 12, and this is a huge game. No changes to the availability report since Wednesday night between the Cougs and the Utes, so still the expectation is that BYU star linebacker Jack Kelly is going to play in this game. And when you dive into this matchup, as we've talked about throughout the week, the statistical profile is so similar. Scoring offense, BYU averages 37.5 points per game. Utah, 39.5. Scoring defense, BYU is only allowing 14.7 points. Utah, 13.8. You can go on and on down the list. Rushing offense, 248 for Utah, 238 for BYU. Passing offense, 210 for BYU, 211 for Utah. It's very similar. And so the margins are going to be razor thin in this game. We've talked about it this week. You got to take care of the turnover margin in this game. That's huge. That's item number one. But I'm also curious to see how BYU's wide receivers perform against the Utah secondary of guys like Smith Snowden, Jackson Benny at safety, Teo Johnson. That's going to be key for BYU. Can Parker Kingston pop off a big play as he did last week? You know, can Chase Roberts pop off a big one too? 2 weeks ago against West Virginia, he had an 85-yard play. That was the longest from scrimmage in 28 years for BYU. Can you get some big plays through the air to make life a little bit easier for Bear Bachmeier? BYU and Utah, both of these teams, typically average their starting field position around their own 30-yard line average this season. So you can't expect methodical 10-plus play drives against these two talented defenses. So which offense can get those chunk yardage plays is going to be huge in this game. I think also gap integrity in this game is going to be vital. When we talk about explosive plays for the offense, Utah's ground attack was really explosive last week. 11 runs of 10 yards or more a week ago against a really good rush defense in Arizona State, and quarterback Devin Dampier led the way. He had a 24-yard run, a 22-yard run. He's really good, and you've got to be assignment sound. Gap integrity for BYU's defensive line and linebackers will be critical. Dampier this season has 33 runs to the edge, and on those runs, he's averaged about 5.4 yards per carry. So that's where you look to Jack Kelly, that D gap. Taking care of gap integrity will be critical for BYU to not let Utah's ground attack take off and have the success they experienced a week ago. And a lot of that is going to be, of course, tied to the battle in the trenches. And both teams have defensive linemen that are chomping at the bit to compete in this game. For BYU, of course, it's Keanu Tanavasa, and he's going up against a Utah offensive line that knows everything about him, and he knows everything about Utah's offensive line. It's definitely a chess match between these two.
Yeah, I love that term, chess match. When I think of those guys, it's been a blessing to go against them for the past 3 years. It was a different offensive scheme. Now them having a new coordinator. Similarly, I play a little bit of a different technique here at the University of Utah. So I think it'll just be who can stick to their fundamentals, and ultimately who can play with that passion, but keep that engagement and focus that is critical to high performance.
That's going to be critical in this game. And on the Utah side, John Henry Daly, a former BYU Cougar, now the leading sack artist for the Utes. 8 sacks this season, John Henry Daly. He's a stud. I knew he'd be good when he picked BYU over Stanford out of high school. Just didn't work out at BYU, but clearly this game means a lot for JHD.
I mean, of course, there's a lot of emotions going into this week, and I think everybody on this team feels it, and we know how much this rivalry means to not only our team, but to our fan base as well, so we want to go out there and take it to them.
You know what's interesting, though, is that BYU's defense is called by Jay Hill, the associate head coach for the Cougars, and he has this gift about him where when he senses something, he kind of gets like a big smile, a big grin. He quietly knew last year BYU was going to take Colorado to task in the Alamo Bowl. They knew. You know, there's been games where Jay Hill just quietly goes about his deal, and he knows, yeah, maybe the outside people you don't know, but you're about to find out. Well, I asked Jay Hill about his thoughts on Utah's offensive line, and this was Jay's response.
Best offensive line in the country is what they tell me. So it's a great challenge for us. I think they are very talented. They're obviously leaning on those guys to keep the offense productive. I like the matchup. I like where our defensive line is at and how we're getting better and better. So that will be a huge component in this game, is just how the defense and offensive lines match up on both sides of this.
Best offensive line, they tell me, in the country. Does Jay know something that we don't know? Hey, you know what helps is having Jack Kelly, of course, and Isaiah Glasker, as you heard yesterday on the podcast. Isaiah's feeling good. He said he's just kind of banged up. You know, he's got a little bit of an arm brace that's new since the recent getting banged up, but they're going to be good to go. That's the expectation for this game, to have those star linebackers, because I think that just opens up everything else for this BYU defense. And you like where BYU secondary is at, too, with Evan Johnson, with Therian Alexander III, and also Maury Bamba, who had his best game as a BYU Cougar last week against Arizona. I would say the Alamo Bowl and last week are Maury's best performances. And the safeties, even though Raider Mooney remains doubtful, I like where Falatau Satuwala sits. He's a playmaker. And then Tanner Wall, of course, too. And Satuwala, you know he's going to have a little bit of a extra chip on the shoulder, too. He was a guy that was heavily recruited by BYU in Utah, and probably in years gone by, people would have said easy pick for the Utes. It was a sign of the recruiting tides changing a little bit with Satuwala coming to play for Jay Hill and for BYU. I don't necessarily believe that this game has much of an impact on recruiting battles, but you know, maybe it can help. BYU's going to have a lot of recruits in attendance for this game, including BYU quarterback commit Ryder Lyons. He will be in attendance for this game. The King of Aura will be on hand to watch, and he'll be able to see Bear Bachmeier in action for BYU, and Bear has got to come up big for the Cougars. I'm really curious to see how many times he runs the football. Last week, 22 carries. That was almost insane to think a BYU quarterback is running the ball that much. But Bear has to produce his best game of his BYU career. What he's done in recent weeks could be good enough, but I don't think last week's showing, the 2 picks in particular, putting the ball on the turf, that will not get it done against Utah. It just won't. You've got to value possessions, and you've got to take some shots downfield and have that ball placement in a spot where there can be no turnovers, but you can give your receiver still a chance to make plays and get that yards after the catch, which has been such a luxury for BYU this year. And that's a credit to Bear Bachmeier and the chemistry he's developed with Chase Roberts and Parker Kingston to put that ball placement in a place where these guys can then go make a play after they catch the pass. Let's break down more BYU and Utah on the other side. It's Cougar Tracks on a game day eve. The Cougs and the Utes here on Cougar Tracks. Welcome back into Cougar Tracks here on the KSL Sports YouTube page every day at high noon on KSL Sports YouTube and KSL News Radio. Going to you live. You can watch and listen to the show. KSL News Radio, 6:30 p.m., KSL Sports YouTube at noon. Subscribe and like this video. And also subscribe to the podcast feed wherever you get your audio podcasts. So, Big Noon Kickoff is arriving in Provo after this show today. I'm going to go down to Provo, check in on some media availability for this broadcast. Fox does a little bit of a media gathering to interview some of the personnel that are on the show. Last year, we got Brady Quinn, Rob Stone, Mark Ingram, Urban Meyer, conveniently. Well, I would say conveniently. There was some weather storms, I think, out on the East Coast, but there was a weather delay for Urban last year. I'd love to hear from Urban and get his thoughts on BYU, because a couple of weeks ago, he was giving a story about how the BYU fans were talking to him when he coached against BYU in Provo in 2003. So I'd like to hear what Urban has to say about coming back to Provo for a second consecutive year. He probably never thought in his wildest dreams he was making trips back to Provo in his life after he got done coaching at Utah in 2004. But also of note, El Presidente, Dave Portnoy, he has arrived in Provo. And last night he was sending out some tweets. Arrived, hashtag the Holy War, picture of the stadium up in the air. And then posted a picture of Y Mountain. And also, Dave went right to work. Pizza reviews, Nico's Pizza. I gave that recommendation on the crossover podcast with Steve Bartle. I said, you got to go to Nico's Pizza, because I tried that for the first time over the summer at the BYU Media Golf event. It was awesome. I got a gift card for it, and then I went to try it, and it was really good. I'm curious to see what Portnoy thinks of Nico's Pizza, but he also hit up, too, last night, Fat Daddy's Pizzeria in Provo as well. So he's already getting to work, getting after it, checking out Provo. He was posting a picture of the views. So Dave Portnoy is here. Who would ever thought? You saw Conor McGregor at a BYU basketball game earlier this year. Now Dave Portnoy. Urban Meyer is going to be here again. Crazy times in Provo. When you win football games, the who's who shows up. But it's cool to see Dave Portnoy and El Presidente rolling into Provo. And he noted, too, that the Barstool show, college football show that typically airs before Big Noon Kickoff, there was some thought of maybe did BYU ban the Barstool show because, you know, they can be a little loud and obnoxious and swear. It's what they do, and I think they do a good job. But he said that BYU did not ban Barstool. In fact, quite the opposite. They requested the show. We only do 6 a year with Big Noon Kickoff. Just wasn't in the cards, but by all indications, they really wanted it and were even willing to offset the extra cost as long as we didn't swear. How about that? Pretty cool. So cool to see Dave Portnoy and El Presidente here in Provo, and Big Noon Kickoff will kick off tomorrow at 8 a.m. Mountain Time and go all the way up until 10 a.m. on Fox. So looking forward to that. Also, BYU basketball. They will be in action tomorrow. So you get done with Big Noon Kickoff in Provo. Then you can enjoy BYU basketball at 11 a.m. against Nebraska on Big Ten Plus. And then during the game, you can hang out with me and Kyle Ireland at noon, all the way up to 4 o'clock at Swig off Canyon Road for extended pregame coverage of BYU and Utah on KSL News Radio. But BYU basketball had some cool news yesterday. AJ Dybantsa appears on the latest cover of Slam Magazine. How about that? A BYU basketball player on Slam Magazine. For millennials, Slam was the Hoopers mag, man. I love Slam Magazine. Loved it growing up. I remember falling in love with it after I got the copy of the 1996 Rookie Class magazine. The Kobe Can't Be Stopped cover. They just had like an edge to those covers that was awesome. It was basketball content that was, really in depth and good, but it brought a little bit of swagger, a little bit of edge to it that you just didn't typically see from sports magazines. It wasn't just your typical analysis. It was kind of a lifestyle magazine too. It's such a good magazine. I'll admit I haven't read one in quite some time, but growing up, I was a regular reader of Slam magazine, and I'll definitely be picking up a copy of AJ Dybantsa. And look, he's in the tunnel. I think that's the on the west side of the Marriott Center, if I had to guess. There was that tunnel down, maybe. I'm not sure on that. It might be, I think it is. I'm not sure. But still, cool picture. And it's cool to see that BYU's got a dude on Slam. Like, that's what I'm talking about. It was a lifestyle Hooper mag. And BYU's got a dude on that cover. Unreal times. I remember those Slam magazine days. Lang Whitaker, Russ Bankston, Scoop Jackson. It was a great magazine. And I loved Kicks. The Kicks magazines were awesome. I probably still have many of my old Slam magazines in my storage unit. I have to go through those one of these days. The Kobe Bryant USA Flag Edition. Man, I love Slam. So a little bit of nostalgia seeing a BYU guy on a magazine that I loved growing up, but AJ Dybantsa, future proof. How about that? So pretty cool stuff there to see AJ, and we'll see him in action against the Nebraska Cornhuskers at 11 a.m. No radio broadcast for this game. It's only Big Ten Plus, and then Nebraska is going to have a radio stream as well, but no BYU-centric radio broadcast. You won't hear it on KSL News Radio or things like that. But next week against North Carolina on October 24th in Salt Lake City, ESPN Plus and KSL News Radio. So be on the lookout for that. We got to take a break, though. On the other side, it's time to give my score prediction for BYU versus Utah. It's Cougar Tracks. It's powered by KSL Sports. Welcome back into Cougar Tracks here on KSL News Radio and the KSL Sports YouTube page. Mitch Harper with you, and it's Friday, day before a game, so you know what time that means. It is here on Cougar Tracks. It's time to give my score prediction.
Score prediction. Will BYU come out on top? It's time for Mitch's score prediction for the next game.
Score prediction time here on Cougar Tracks. It's a tough one, man. BYU and Utah is not an easy game to pick. But one thing that you can rely on in this game, it's not going to typically be high scoring. Utah, they've had some games where they put some big offensive numbers up in this rivalry since Kyle Whittingham became the head coach. Since 2000, Utah has scored over 30 points 8 times in the rivalry. BYU since 2000, only 3 times, and they haven't done it since 2006. So the common thread in all of this is defenses always show up in this game. It's been almost 20 years since BYU scored more than 30 points against the Utes. That's crazy. 20 years, excuse me. So it's been a long time since BYU scored at a high level. I'm expecting a defensive game. I think that BYU and Utah will play a little bit of field position back and forth. I think both teams will take care of the football, and you're going to see a lot of punts early on. I think you're going to see some sort of crazy mishap of some kind, some sort of maybe missed field goal, something crazy in this game, and it's like 9-6 or whatever at halftime. Just a weird score at half. To end it, though, I'm saying BYU comes out on top. BYU 17, Utah 16. And that would be quite the effort from BYU's defense to hold Utah's offense in check, because Jason Beck and this Utah offense, they're good. They are really good. They're explosive, and they are efficient in the red zone. Utah this season in the red zone, 25 touchdowns on 29 attempts. They've had 3 field goals as well. So 28 of 29. BYU, by comparison, 29 red zone attempts, only 26 conversions. But keep in mind, 17 touchdowns, 9 field goals. BYU has not scored anywhere near the amount of touchdowns like Utah has when they get into the red zone. In this game, when you do get your red zone chances, if you're BYU, you have to get touchdowns. You have to. I'm expecting some field goals, but if you want to pull away and have a chance to maybe have a victory formation and not need some late game heroics and allow the emotions to get off the charts high, score some touchdowns in the red zone. But I'm saying those emotions are going to be high. And I think that BYU comes out on top 17-16 and gets their 3rd consecutive victory in the rivalry, which would be the first time since 1992, 89 to 1992. That's the last time BYU had a stretch of 3 consecutive wins over Utah. At some point, BYU's due for a 3-game win streak. It's been 33 years. And if you get this one, potentially with Witt maybe being in the twilight of his career, gosh, that would be massive for BYU, and to do it in front of the home crowd. And also, too, if you get this one, you're at 7-0, more than halfway through your season. The schedule is still tough, but Iowa State's slipping up a little bit. Iowa State's on a bye this week. You could start dreaming big. One thing I will say, too, if you do get the win, BYU, hey, Cougar fans, celebrate the win, storm the field, do all of that, get the Big 12 fine, just don't throw tortillas. Text saying, please do not throw tortillas, $100,000. Storm the field and just go to bed at a reasonable hour. And I say that because remember last year, BYU and Utah, Cougar fans celebrated the team's arrival back to the student-athlete building on the team bus. Crowd surfed with Will Ferrin. And the team really didn't go to bed until about 6 a.m. And I think that had to carry over to the following week against Kansas. Next week is going to be so difficult against Iowa State. We'll cross that bridge when it happens. But if you do win, BYU, go to bed at a reasonable hour because you still got a season ahead. You don't want to let this one game, if you do get the win, just become your peak, your greatest moment of the season. There's still more challenges ahead. And that is the challenging thing about BYU and Utah, because this is such an emotional game. It is such a difficult game that the emotions just are so high in this one. And it's almost like 3 games packed into one. And I'm expecting a game that's going to have a lot of crazy twists and turns. But I think these are 2 pretty sound football teams. And I think they'll play pretty clean. That's what I hope to see. I don't want to see a lot of penalties. I want this to be a clean football game where last team with the ball has a chance to win it. And I think that's what it's going to be. And I think that team's going to be BYU. And I think Will Ferrin comes up clutch again. I think Ferrin's going to be the player of the game, and his legendary status at BYU grows to even greater heights if he can get another game winner against the Utes. So again, my final score prediction is BYU 17, Utah 16. Some other players that I'm watching in this game, Carson Ryan, I think he needs a big game for BYU. He's got to be that safety blanket for Bear Bachmeier when you're turning to the air. I also think that, Bruce Mitchell, take care of those snaps. Those have got to be in a great place. Do not have any high snaps. PAT snaps got to be dialed in. Everything's got to be locked in. Garrison Grimes, everything. The snaps, all of that stuff has got to be laser focused, dialed in. And I think they will. BYU's a sound football team. BYU, what's interesting about BYU too, is regardless of the circumstances, they find ways to win. They are this team that they find a way to get it done. That's what they do. That is BYU football these days. So there's no reason to think that if faced with adversity, they can't get it done again. And it's going to be a huge opportunity and huge stage for quarterback Bear Bachmeier and this entire BYU team. And I think if they win this one, I think they catapult into the top 10. I think there'll be a little bit of a knee-jerk reaction like, oh, maybe we should take notice of this BYU team. but they got to go get it done. BYU versus Utah kicks off on Saturday night, 6 p.m. And extended radio pregame coverage begins at noon at Swig on Canyon Road. So just a little bit south of Lavelle Edwards Stadium. Come swing by, stop, hang out with me and Kyle Ireland. We will have you covered for the Cougs and the Utes. And it'll all be right here on KSL News Radio and KSLSports.com. Have a great weekend, everybody.